I still remember the exact second my heart dropped. Before the anger, before the pain, before I even understood what I was looking at. I had just pulled up to the house after a long drive, my hands still stiff on the steering wheel, my suit wrinkled from hours of sitting. The smell of wilted flowers and damp earth from the funeral clung to my clothes. I wasn't ready to be home, but I needed to be. I needed quiet. I needed something familiar to hold me together. Instead, I saw my life scattered across the lawn. At first, my brain refused to register it. A box here, a suitcase there, a coat I hadn't worn in years lying half open, its lining exposed to the sun like a wound. I thought maybe there had been a break-in. Maybe the movers had come early. Maybe anything but what it actually was. I stepped out of the car and my shoe nudged something hard. I looked down. It was my old toolbox, the one I used for 38 years. The latch was broken. My hands started to shake. That's when the front door opened. My son stood there. Not angry, not rushed, calm, almost bored. He leaned against the doorframe like this was an ordinary Tuesday, and not the day his father came home from burying family. "Those old things were taking up space," he said. "We're cleaning up." Cleaning up. I stared at him, waiting for the rest of the sentence, waiting for a joke, waiting for him to notice the black suit I was still wearing, waiting for him to ask how the funeral went. Nothing. I looked back at the lawn, my clothes, my documents, the photo albums from when he was a baby, the jacket his mother bought me before she died. All of it stacked like garbage bags on pickup day. "Trash," he added, like he was clarifying a point. That word hit harder than anything else. Trash. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I couldn't. The shock had wrapped around my chest too tight. I just stood there, trying to understand how a man I carried on my shoulders could look at my entire life and reduce it to a problem that needed to be cleared out. This was the house I paid for, the house I worked night shifts and weekends to keep, the house I opened up because I believed family meant something more than ownership. I had never asked for thanks. I had never asked to be repaid. I thought that mattered. Apparently, it didn't. I bent down and picked up one of the boxes. The bottom gave way, and papers spilled onto the grass. Insurance forms, old letters, things I kept because they reminded me who I was, who I had been before everything else was taken from me, piece by piece. Behind me, my son sighed, impatient. "Just take what you need," he said. "We're starting fresh." That was the moment I realized something was deeply wrong. This wasn't a fight. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a decision made quietly, carefully, without me in the room. People think a revenge story starts with rage. It doesn't. It starts with disbelief. With the slow, sick understanding that someone you sacrificed everything for has already decided you no longer count. I stood there on that lawn, holding a broken box, and I didn't know it yet, but my life had just been divided into two parts. Everything before that door opened, and everything that came after. People always think stories like this start with a fight. They don't. They start years earlier, in quiet moments no one sees. Long before my things were thrown on the lawn, long before that door opened, this story had already been written, one sacrifice at a time. I raised my son mostly on my own. His mother died young, and overnight I became two parents in one body. I worked wherever I could, warehouses, night shifts, weekends, Jobs that left my hands cracked and my back screaming. I didn't complain. I didn't keep score. That's not how fathers think. You don't raise a child expecting repayment. You do it because that's your job. Every dollar I earned had a purpose. School supplies, shoes when he outgrew the old ones too fast, doctor visits, rent. And when I finally managed to buy this house, I didn't see it as an investment. I saw it as proof that my son would never have to start from nothing the way I did. When he got older, I opened the door wider instead of closing it. Stay here, I told him. Save your money, build your future. I didn't charge rent. I didn't ask for utilities. I didn't set rules. I thought trust was enough. Maybe that's where I went wrong. I never reminded him of what I'd done. Not once. I didn't bring up the nights I skipped meals so he could eat more. I didn't talk about the overtime hours that stole years from my life. I didn't say, I did this for you. Because love that needs to be announced doesn't feel like love at all. And maybe that's why it was so easy to erase. Standing on that lawn, looking at my things, I realized something painful. When you give quietly for too long, people forget it was ever a gift. They start to think it was always theirs. Have you ever felt that? Honestly, have you ever given so much that one day it felt invisible? Not unappreciated, invisible. Like the work of your entire life was just background noise. If you have, you already know how heavy that feeling is. It doesn't shout, it sinks. I kept thinking back to small moments, teaching him how to ride a bike, showing him how to use a wrench without stripping the bolt, sitting in the car with him before his first job interview, telling him he didn't need to be perfect, just honest. Those moments weren't dramatic, but they were real. They were mine, and now they were being rewritten. What hurt the most wasn't losing a room or a bed. It was realizing that, in his mind, none of those years counted anymore. The sacrifices weren't denied outright. They were quietly dismissed, as if they'd expired, as if love had a shelf life. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about space. It wasn't about cleaning. It wasn't even about control. It was about replacing the past. I stood there, surrounded by pieces of my own history, and for the first time in my life, I understood something I'd never wanted to admit. Being a father doesn't protect you from being discarded. Sometimes, it makes you easier to discard. And I still didn't know it then, but the next thing my son was about to give me would confirm it in a way I was never prepared for. The shed was never meant for people. Everyone knew that. It was a place for old tools, paint cans, things you didn't need every day but couldn't quite throw away. And yet, that was where my son led me when I asked, quietly, where I was supposed to sleep. He didn't hesitate. That was the part that stayed with me. It's temporary, he said, already turning away, just until things settle. The shed sat at the back of the yard, half hidden by a fence that leaned a little too far to the left. The door stuck when he pulled it open, and the smell hit me immediately. Dust, oil, damp wood. Inside, there was a narrow folding bed pressed against the wall. A thin mattress that looked like it had been pulled from a storage unit. One bare bulb hung from the ceiling, casting a tired yellow light that didn't quite reach the corners. "You can use this," he said. "Just don't leave a mess." I stood there, trying to understand how we'd gotten to a point where he was giving me instructions like I was a stranger passing through. Not his father. Not the man who taught him how to shave, how to drive, how to stand up for himself. Just someone who needed rules. He added a few more without looking at me. I could use the bathroom in the house, but only during certain hours. The kitchen was off limits, unless I asked. It was better if I stayed out of sight when guests came over. He said all of it calmly, as if he were reading off a checklist. I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I didn't trust my voice. That first night, I lay on the folding bed, listening to the house I used to live in. Laughter floated through the open window. Dishes clinked. A television murmured in the background. Life went on 10 steps away from me, warm and full, while I lay staring at a ceiling I didn't recognize. I realized something then. I hadn't just been moved out of a room. I'd been moved out of the family. In the days that followed, the rules settled in like cold weather. The back door stayed locked most of the time. When I came in to shower, my son checked the clock. If I lingered, he cleared his throat. When I left my shoes by the door one afternoon, he picked them up and set them outside without a word. No yelling, no insults, just quiet corrections that said the same thing over and over again. You don't belong here anymore. I kept telling myself this was temporary, that he was stressed, that things would change once everything settled. That's what fathers do. We explain away what hurts because admitting the truth feels worse. But late one evening, as I stood in the yard watching the lights go out one by one in the house, it finally hit me. This wasn't about space or order or renovations. This was about control, about drawing a line and placing me firmly on the wrong side of it. I wasn't being pushed into a shed. I was being pushed out of the life I built. And the worst part was how quietly it was happening. No shouting, no drama, just a steady erasing. I didn't know it yet, but the next step in that erasing was already waiting for me, sealed inside an envelope, ready to finish what the shed had started. He didn't bring it out right away. That was the first thing that told me this wasn't anger. It wasn't impulse. It was planned. I was sitting on the edge of the folding bed in the shed, my jacket still on, my hands wrapped around a paper cup of lukewarm coffee I didn't remember pouring. The sun had already gone down, and the house behind me glowed softly through the windows. Laughter drifted out again. A television. Life continuing without me. That's when I heard his footsteps on the gravel. He stopped a few feet away, just outside the door. He didn't come in. He never came in anymore. "Dad," he said, calm, almost careful. "We need to clear something up." I looked up. He was holding an envelope, white, clean, no wrinkles. He hadn't rushed this. He hadn't grabbed the nearest scrap of paper. He had taken the time to choose it. He stepped forward and placed the envelope on the small table by the door, aligning it neatly with the edge, like it mattered that it be straight. "I just need you to read this," he said. "After that, things will be simpler." Simpler. I didn't open it right away. I looked at his face instead, searching for something. Hesitation, doubt, anything that looked like the boy I raised. There was nothing there. Just distance, just resolve. Finally, I slid a finger under the flap. The paper inside was crisp, typed. No handwriting, no emotion left to interpret. "Dad, I'm not your son." That was it. No explanation, no apology, no signature. For a moment, I thought I'd misread it, that my eyes were playing tricks on me in the dim light. I read it again, slower this time. "Dad, I'm not your son." Something in my chest went quiet. Not loud, not sharp. Quiet. Like a room where all the air has been taken out. I had a lawyer look at it, he said, breaking the silence. His voice was steady, rehearsed. It's cleaner this way. I looked up at him. If you're not my father, he continued, then you're not family. And if you're not family, you don't belong here. There it was. Not shouted, not thrown in my face. Delivered like a business decision, like closing an account. I wanted to ask 1,000 questions about tests, about timing, about how long he'd been carrying this. But none of that mattered, and I knew it. Whether it was true or not didn't change what he'd chosen to believe, and more importantly, why. This wasn't about blood. This was about permission. Permission to erase me. Permission to take without owing. Permission to call everything I gave the past and move on without looking back. I folded the paper once, carefully. My hands didn't shake. That surprised me. So this is what my life is worth to you, I said quietly. He didn't answer. He just nodded as if that settled it. As he turned to leave, a light breeze stirred the papers on the table. One of the boxes near the door shifted, and a framed photo slid out, landing face up on the floor between us. His mother and me on our wedding day, younger than I remembered, smiling like we believed life was fair. He froze, just for a second. Then he stepped over it and walked away. I stood there alone, holding an envelope that didn't just deny my blood. It denied every sacrifice that came with it. And in that moment, I understood something with painful clarity. Being a father hadn't protected me from this. It had made it easier. Because you can't erase a stranger this cleanly. I stayed where I was long after he left. The shed felt smaller than it had an hour ago, like the walls had moved in just enough to make breathing harder. I set the envelope down on the table, next to the cup of cold coffee, and stared at it as if it might change if I looked long enough. It didn't. Words like that don't soften with time. They harden. I told myself I wouldn't cry. Not because I was strong, but because I was empty. Crying requires something left inside to give, and at that moment, I wasn't sure I had anything left at all. I stood up and stepped outside. The night air was cool, carrying the faint smell of grass and oil from the shed. The lawn was still littered with my things, half shadowed by the porch light. Boxes, bags, pieces of a life that apparently no longer qualified to exist indoors. I walked slowly, carefully, as if each step mattered. I bent down to straighten one of the boxes, more out of habit than hope. That's when it happened. A light breeze moved through the yard. Nothing dramatic, just enough to stir loose paper. One of the boxes shifted, its lid lifting slightly, and something slid out onto the grass. A framed photo, landing face up. Our wedding picture. His mother and me, standing in front of a courthouse that no longer exists, her hair pinned back too tightly, my tie crooked. We were smiling in that reckless way young people do, convinced that love alone could outlast anything. I had almost forgotten how proud I looked that day. The photo came to rest near the path that led back to the house, and at that exact moment, the door opened again. My son stepped out, keys in hand. He froze when he saw the picture at his feet. It wasn't a big reaction. No gasp, no curse. Just a pause. One small, unplanned pause where his body stopped before his mind could catch up. He looked down. Really looked. For a second, I thought he might bend down, pick it up, say something, anything. He didn't. He cleared his throat, softly, the same way he had when he used to do it to remind me of the rules, and stepped around the photo as if it were an inconvenience, not a memory. His shoe brushed the edge of the frame, nudging it slightly into the grass. That was it. That was the whole moment. And somehow, that tiny, almost ridiculous thing, the careful sidestep, the refusal to even touch it, did more than all the words he'd said before. It was the kind of quiet irony that doesn't make you laugh out loud, but makes you shake your head because the truth is too sharp to ignore. He could deny me. He could deny blood. He could deny obligation. But he couldn't control that moment. He couldn't stop his own feet from hesitating. He couldn't erase the instinct that told him, even now, that some things shouldn't be stepped over so easily. He walked off toward the driveway, the sound of his keys fading into the dark. I stood there alone, staring at the photo between us, and for the first time that night, something inside me shifted. Not anger, clarity. I understood then that this wasn't just a rejection. It was a transaction. He had handed me an envelope to wipe away everything that made him uncomfortable. Gratitude, history, debt. And in doing so, he'd shown me exactly who he was willing to be to get what he wanted. That's when I realized something else, something I hadn't let myself think until that moment. This wasn't just my loss. It was his. People like to say every revenge story begins with fury. That's not true. Some begin with a quiet step around a photograph on the grass, and the sudden knowledge that you're done begging to be remembered. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay on the folding bed, staring at the ceiling of the shed, listening to the faint drip of something leaking somewhere behind the wall. Each drop sounded louder than the last, like a clock counting down to something I couldn't see yet. The envelope sat on the table beside me, face down, as if even the paper knew it had done enough damage for one night. At some point, I sat up and reached for the old notebook I kept in my bag. I'd carried it for years without thinking much about it. Habits like that don't feel important until they save you. Inside were dates, notes, numbers, nothing fancy. Just a man's way of keeping track of what mattered when no one else did. I flipped to the back and started turning pages. That's when the cold set in. Transfers I didn't recognize. Withdrawals that didn't line up with any repairs or emergencies. Small at first, then larger. Regular. Confident. Like whoever was doing it knew no one would question them. I pulled out my phone and opened the bank app, my thumb moving slower than usual. The balance loaded, and for a second I thought the screen was wrong. I refreshed it. Same number. Most of it was gone. Not all at once, not recklessly. Carefully. Over time. The way you take from someone who trusts you. Because trust makes the taking easier. I sat there, the phone heavy in my hand, and something strange happened. The pain didn't spike. It drained away. What replaced it wasn't rage or panic. It was distance. I thought about all the moments I'd explained away. The new furniture that appeared without warning. The trips he never talked about. The way he'd stopped showing me receipts because it was simpler. I had believed him because believing him was easier than imagining this. That's when I understood what the envelope really was. It wasn't the beginning. It was the cover. If I wasn't his father, then he didn't owe me honesty. If I wasn't family, then taking from me wasn't betrayal. It was just business. The words on that page weren't meant to hurt me. They were meant to protect him. I closed the app and set the phone down. For the first time since I'd pulled into that driveway, I didn't feel small. I felt clear. Clear enough to see the shape of what had been happening around me, piece by piece. Clear enough to know that this wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about boundaries. Ones I had never drawn because I thought love made them unnecessary. I stood up and looked around the shed. The bare bulb, the folding bed, the boxes on the lawn beyond the door. This was where he had placed me when he decided I no longer counted. And that was fine, because now I knew where I stood. I folded the notebook closed and slipped it back into my bag, right next to the envelope. 2 pieces of paper. One meant to erase me, the other about to prove I hadn't disappeared at all. I lay back down, the drip continuing its steady rhythm, and for the first time that night, my breathing slowed. I wasn't planning anything yet. I wasn't ready to act, but I was done guessing. If you've ever had a moment like that, when the hurt finally gives way to clarity, you know what I mean. It's quiet, almost peaceful. And once it happens, there's no going back to the way things were before.